She was just a child, barely 10, when the Pontifex Maximus, Rome's highest priest, pointed her out in a crowd. In that moment her fate was sealed. No applause followed. No celebration. Only silence, and perhaps behind the solemn faces of her parents, the shadow of dread. Because when Rome chose a girl to become a Vestal Virgin, it was not a gift. It was a lifetime sentence dressed as honor. She wasn't chosen for her ambition, her brilliance, or her will. She was chosen because she was pure. Because her family was intact, her birth legitimate, and her body untouched. She would be taken to serve Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and in doing so she would be given over to the state, not as a citizen but as sacred property. Families didn't always rejoice. Many wept. Some begged. But refusal was never an option. Once chosen, the girl would be led away, silently crossing the sacred road, Sacra Via, for the final time as a daughter of her house. From then on she belonged to Rome. The ritual was steeped in symbolism and silence. Inside the Atrium Vesti, the house of the Vestals, she would spend 30 years behind walls cloaked in both reverence and isolation. 10 years to learn, 10 to serve, and 10 to teach. She would guard a flame that could never go out, the eternal fire of Rome itself. If it flickered, the empire trembled. But her role wasn't just ceremonial. It was political. Her body, untouched and untouched by men, symbolized Rome's purity. Her virginity wasn't hers, it was a national relic guarded more fiercely than any crown jewel. She lived cloaked in white, revered in public, but watched with suspicion behind closed doors. She wasn't a free citizen. She couldn't marry, couldn't leave, couldn't even speak too freely to men. And if she failed, if she let the sacred fire die, if she disobeyed, or worst of all, if she broke her vow of chastity, the punishment wasn't symbolic. It was swift, calculated, and brutal. When the sacred flame extinguished, it was seen as an omen that the gods had turned away. Sometimes the Pontifex Maximus would administer punishment himself, whipping the offender in darkness, away from public view. Not to preserve dignity but to protect the illusion. Even sacred figures bled in silence. But the worst fate was reserved for the ultimate betrayal, the sin of incestum, breaking the vow of chastity. And Rome had one punishment for that. A punishment so chilling it required no bloodshed. No blade. No spectacle. Burial alive. It happened in 216 BCE. 2 Vestals, Opimia and Floronia, accused of breaking their vow. No public trial. No defense on record. The College of Pontiffs passed judgment. One took her own life. The other walked, barefoot, veiled, silent, through the forum like a bride on her wedding day. But this was no wedding. It was a state execution dressed as a divine offering. The procession ended at Campus Celeratus, the field of the wicked, just outside the Colline Gate. There, beneath the ground, a chamber waited. A bed, a lamp, a jug of water, some bread, some milk. Enough to claim she hadn't been killed. Only imprisoned. But there was no door. No escape. Only earth closing in. And this wasn't a rare event. It was ritual. Rome believed in bloodless punishment for sacred crimes, yet what could be more violent than sealing a young woman beneath the soil, alone, forgotten, erased? The state refused to call it murder. That's what made it more terrifying. They didn't see her as a person anymore, but as a vessel that failed. A symbol that cracked. And the people watched. Quietly. Because questioning the ritual was like questioning Rome itself. You might think this is just ancient history. But pause for a moment, think of the cost of creating symbols out of people. What happens when a society values purity more than humanity? When women are sanctified but not protected? Revered until they slip, and then erased? That's what the story of the Vestals teaches us. That even in a city of law, of empire, of gods and glory, some were still buried for being human. And if you're still here, still listening, ask yourself this: how many stories like these have been forgotten? Sealed under the weight of tradition, silence, and fear? If you want more untold truths, the ones they left out of your history books, hit subscribe, because we're not done digging. Not even close. As Thucydides once said, the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. Rome was strong. The Vestals were pure. But in the end, that purity became their prison.